temperature for oxygen, wouldn't know which cell the oxygen is coming from and which cell it's going to. But you can form a gradient of associative resistance in a small molecule that diffuses as rapidly as does oxygen. Can oxygen induce a different diffusible substance that diffuses more slowly? That's a possibility. Can oxygen activate a gene that makes the cell surface ligand that sticks out of one cell that's perceived by receptors to stick out of the neighboring cell, like efferents in mammalian cells, which act that way? That's a possibility. But there's one other possibility that we had to consider. It's a little bit of a radical possibility, which is that oxygen causes cell expansion, as we discussed in the term, and as a result of that, it creates physical forces within the tissue that must affect neighboring cells in the tissue, that must affect neighboring forces within the tissue, that creates physical forces within the tissue. Let's think a little bit about what could be going on here. Here's a view of one of our time lapses showing the nuclei shooting meristem cells staying with a fluorescent probe over a short time course of some hours, and we can see the nuclei where cells divide, they pop into two nuclei. And if we use our computer image processing methods to find the center of the nucleus, we come up with a picture like this. And we could exclude the nuclei of cells that divide, and so we're using all the other nuclei as neutral points for positions in the tissue. And so what we're seeing here is the effects of both the expansion of cells in the meristem and division of cells as they force the nuclei of undivided cells farther and farther apart. And if we analyze this computer representation with another stage of image processing, we can make a heat map of the expanding regions in the shoot apical meristem so that the regions where the nuclei are moving apart from each other more rapidly are orange and more slowly are blue. We can make that in 3 dimensions, and what we see with these rectangles representing the principal directions of growth, and the heat map that colors orange the most rapidly expanding cells and blue the cells that are expanding less rapidly. And what we see is the orange pattern fits exactly the pattern of auxin that we saw in our earlier auxin reporter slide in the previous talk. So that each place in the meristem where auxin is at higher concentration, the tissue is growing more rapidly than the places where auxin is at lower concentration, those places that won't soon be making a new flower primordium, the tissue is growing more slowly. And in fact, the time course of this image is such that very few of the cells divided. So what we're really seeing here is the direct effect of auxin causing the cells to expand into positions that later will be occupied by the primordia and new flowers. So we know that the positions where new flowers are about to form and those cells that are high in auxin are pressing on their neighbors. And think about a plant tissue. It's quite solid. High trigger pressure, as we discussed in the last part, restrained by a cell wall, and it makes the tissue like a carrot. You crack it, you hear that crack, that's the explosive decompression of cells relieving the trigger pressure. They're pressing on each other like bricks in a brick wall pressing on each other. And imagine what would happen in a brick wall if one of the bricks started to expand and the others didn't. There'd be huge stresses in the surrounding bricks, and they would crack and they would fall out of the wall. So why doesn't that happen in this case? We have the same degree of expansion, something that's very tight, and it's because the cells have, in some way, to respond to the stress. Now, why would we consider that stress to be a signal of auxin concentration? It could be perceived by the neighboring cells. The model would be that as a cell expands, it stresses the common wall it has with the neighbor, and the plasma membrane of that neighboring cell then gets loaded with more PIN1, which causes the auxin to be directed towards the high auxin cell. So the cell has to be able to sense the stress on the common wall and then add more PIN1 to its plasma membrane, which is done by exocytosis. You know how the PIN1 gets there. So that would be our model. Does this make any sense in terms of what we know about plants? Well, yes it does, and it explains some earlier experiments, it's true, that otherwise seem quite puzzling. I mentioned in previous talks that if we add a drop of auxin to a shoot apical meristem, we can induce the formation of the new flower at that position in the meristem. But there's something else that you can drop in a new meristem and equally induce the formation of the new leaf or new flower. And that's expansion, an enzyme that causes the weakening of cell walls directly, and not through changing gene activity the way auxin does. And Fleming and collaborators over a year starting in 1997 did a series of experiments where they showed that expansion actually does auxin. But all the expansion is doing is weakening the cell walls and letting the cells expand. And somehow this triggers the flower development just as well as auxin does, with all of its subsequent changes in gene activity. Similarly, pentamethyl esterase, which is an enzyme that affects cell wall stiffness, changes the phylotactic pattern that is put on top of the shoot apical meristem. And so the target of auxin in inducing a new flower seems as likely to be the cell wall as to be the gene regulatory changes that auxin causes in an individual cell, so that we know that the cell wall is signaling somehow to the cells in the shoot apical meristem. Could it be that this signal is the one for which cells are responding so that they partition their PIN1 in the plasma membrane? So to see if this is a possibility, we made a computational model just like our earlier phyllotaxis models, in which the stress felt in the walls between two cells reads out to PIN1 concentration in the lower auxin of those cells, and it creates a pattern, just like the phylotactic pattern we saw before, but locked up in this case because we didn't have adequate cell division in this model. And then what else we did in this model, which is a physical model of the shoot apical meristem, in which the stresses in each cell are part of the computational modeling, we ablated a cell right in the middle of the meristem. And when we ablate that cell, the image on the left shows auxin concentration, and the image on the right shows where PIN1 is expected to go if we take a laser and we blow up a cell in the shoot apical meristem. So we did that. This is the expectation of the physical model, is that if you blow up a cell, you should cause added stress on the walls behind the cell that's blown up, this has blown up, and then more stress on these walls, and then subsequently on these walls, it's moving back. The reason for that is that the epidermis of the acute apical meristem is, as a whole, under tension. It's being stretched. And this has been known for almost 200 years, that the epidermal layer of plants is under tension, resisting the trigger pressure and the expansion of the cells underneath. One of the early demonstrations of this by von Sachs in 1880 was to cut a dandelion stem right up the middle with a razor. And as you saw, it rolled up like that. Because the epidermis is under tension, and that tension is resisting the pressure of the cells underneath. And that's equally true of the acute apical meristem. So you have a stretched tissue. We eliminate a cell, we eliminate and continue to repair its walls, the wall the hole we've made enlarges, and that creates circumferential stress here and then here and then here as we move back. So the expectation of our stress model is when we take a laser, a high-powered dicoupled laser, and add it to our confocal microscope, and while we're watching, we kill a cell, and then we look to see what happens to the pin 1 in the cells surrounding the dead cell. If our stress model is correct, we expect to see the pin 1 move to the back of the cells surrounding the unplated cell, and to the back of the next cell, and the back of the next cell. Which is exactly what we do see. We're going to use pin 1 as two new things. Are the two cells that we killed staying in the vital dot, and the pin 1 is moved to the back of the cells, the back of these cells, and it's in the process of moving to the back of yet another cell. So it's exactly as predicted by a stress model, but not at all the way you would predict if oxygen or some other diffusible substance is creating the pattern, because this pattern results from physical changes. It's not the pattern you'd expect from chemical changes. Now you can ask if it's possible that there's some other chemical that's fooling us, and we wounded the cell and it's exuding some sort of wound signal that makes the pin 1 go to the other sides, and we've made a number of control experiments to show that isn't. And here's an example of one where we wounded the cells, cells of the acute apical meristem, let's break it with a needle. And if you do that, the pin 1 normally will go to the back of the cells next to the scrape and to the back of the next cells, just according to the physical model. If we relieve the trigger pressure on the right-hand side here, and we, by adding a non-metabolized sugar to the medium that's equal in amounts to solutes inside the cells, and then we do the wounding, the pin 1 doesn't do a thing. So if it's not a chemical signal, it's a physical signal. It's causing the realignment of the pin 1. And so what can we say about this then? We can take a model where oxygen transport, that we discussed in the last talk, adds to the oxygen concentration in a particular cell, causing that cell to grow. And a cell with more oxygen grows more, which changes the tissue shape because it's pressing out on its neighbors, thereby creating a mechanical stress which feeds back to the pattern of oxygen transport. So that we have a feedback loop whereby oxygen controls its own flow by weakening the walls of the cells and causing cell expansion through a stress feedback loop. There's another element to this that we discovered while we were studying pin 1 transport. So that since the epidermis of the acute apical meristem is under tension, we can treat it as a pressure vessel. In the centuries before this one, engineers who built boilers had to understand the stresses of boilers to prevent industrial accidents, or at least to aim them towards the ceiling instead of the wall. And what they found was that spherical and hemispherical pressure vessels, boilers, have isotropic stresses. The stresses are the same in all directions. Instead of having a preferred direction, which they explode. And a cylinder has a preferred stress direction circumferentially. It's close explosion. It's up and down. Which is why an unreinforced cylinder of that type, when it gets too much pressure in it, will blow open with a long hole this way. The stress is more in this direction than it is in this direction. We applied those same sort of pressure vessel calculations to our acute apical meristem, which is an epidermal layer under tension, as is a boiler, so that we can estimate what some of the forces were, and of course in making our pin 1 models. And what we saw was this, is that in the hemispherical part of the acute apical meristem, at the very top, the stresses are the same in all directions, they're isotropic. And in places like the boundaries between a flower primordium and the meristem, the stresses are very strongly tensional across the saddle point, and they can even be compressional in the orthogonal directions across the saddle. So that we have a pattern of stresses that results from the shape of the tissue, that's intrinsic to the shape of the tissue, because the epidermis is under tension. And they can be calculated the same way boiler pressures are calculated. And so when we look at these tissues, we look here at one of the elements of the plant cytoskeleton, the microtubules. And we see the microtubules in the acute apical meristem, we see the surprising fact that they line exactly according to our stress model. So if we look at the microtubules in the central part here, there are no particular preferred orientation. And these microtubules are what in plants are called cortical microtubules that wrap around the cells in a helical fashion just under the plasma membrane. We'll see cortical microtubules in the first that's the discovery of microtubules. When we look over at these boundary regions where the stresses are thought to be strongly tensional in this direction, the microtubules are entirely aligned with that. If we look over time at this, these microtubules in the isotropic regions continue to change in direction, while these microtubules are fixed. And so we have a second result of stress in the acute apical meristem, one that enables us to read out stress independently of pin 1, and we can see the correlation between microtubule patterns and pin 1 patterns, which helps us to support the physical model of pin 1 localization. And there's another implication of the cytoskeletal aspect of stress that's very important for understanding the protracted pattern in the acute apical meristem. So that the microtubules are aligned in parallel to the maximal principal direction of stress. The stress is isotropic. It's a mouthful, but that's the hypothesis, and that's what the evidence supports. In fact, we can test that by compressing the meristem. We built a device to squeeze the meristem, as you can see here. We've started to squeeze it. We tend to squeeze on for 6 hours. The meristem takes 6 progressing. And as we do that, the microtubules at the top of the meristem stop continually realigning and become aligned, and they become aligned parallel to the principal direction of the tension stress, which you can see here is the before and after picture. So on the left, the squeezing, before and after. And you can see the alignment of the microtubules following the post-pattern of stress that we had. So again, experimental methods need to intervene with stress, or in another way, we can ablate cells and change the stress pattern, as we did for pin 1, and cause a realignment of the cytoskeleton. So here's a physical model, it's called a finite element depth model, a physical model of cells all under trigger pressure, in a layer. Underneath there's another layer. The layer underneath is pushing up on this one, so this one is under, the layer we see on top here is under tension, just like in a real meristem. And the little white lines, difficult to see, but they're the principal directions of maximal stress in each of the cell walls, and they're quite random at the top because the stresses are isotropic in this hemispherical part of the meristem. If we ablate a cell in the computer, the stress is realigned and becomes circumferential to the ablated cell, and then that would make the pin 1 go back to these walls because these walls become less stressed. But the overall stress pattern is circumferential and around the hole we create. So that if we do a live imaging experiment and we watch the microtubules, then we ablate a cell, what happens is the microtubules realign within about 6 hours to the circumferential to the ablated cell. So just like for pin 1, which in 2 to 6 hours reorient to be the plasma membrane adjacent to the most stressed wall, the cytoskeleton of these cells realigns to be parallel to the principal maximal direction of stress, when the stress is anisotropic. What does this mean for the cells? Well, here's some acute apical meristem cells, so you can see what real cells look like. The electron micrograph, the nuclei are here. These aren't these nuclei within the nucleus, which is here. And then we see the cell wall, about 80 or 100 nanometers thick, that's resisting all of this trigger pressure here. Now, the resistance to trigger pressure in a plant cell wall is due largely to the deposition of cellulose fibrils in the wall by cellulose synthase enzymes, which ride along the microtubules as tracks and deposit cellulose outside the cell, in the direction of the microtubules of these cells. Individual cellulose fibrils, which are made up of numerous cellulose molecules twisted around each other like a thread, have the tensile strength. It's about half that of steel. They're very strong and they strain very little under stress. And so they reinforce the cells in whatever direction they're laid down. If we look here, the green on this left-hand side, these are some cells on these in the picture. And the big green spots are Golgi vesicles depositing the cellulose synthase complexes near the surface. And the little green dots, if you look closely, are those complexes moving along the microtubules and laying cellulose fibrils down. So what happens then? When we look at this, we have microtubule orientation response to stress, and the microtubules align in the stress direction. The cellulose synthases ride along the microtubules and reinforce the cells in that direction. So that when the cells expand subsequently, they expand orthogonally the cellulose fibers, the right angles to the direction we see laid down, because they resist expansion. So the direction of expansion of the cells in the shape of the meristem depends on cellulose reinforcement, which depended on microtubule alignment, which depended on the stress pattern. So if you pull on a cell, after a few hours, its cellulose is lined up in the direction of the stress you created, and the cell starts to expand in the other direction. So we have two different pathways that feed into the expansion of cells in the shape of the meristem. One is the auxin pathway, whereby auxin causes the cell to expand, and its rate of expansion is proportional to the auxin concentration, but the direction in which it expands depends on the microtubule orientation. So you have two stresses, one acting positively on cell expansion, that auxin-rich cell attracts more auxin if the stress makes it expand more, but one could resist that expansion because a cell that realigns its microtubules to that direction of expansion restricts expansion in that direction and causes expansion to occur in another. So it's a negative directional feedback of cell expansion. Each of these affects the mechanical stress of the tissue, and each of these affects the other pathway. So we have overall a set of feedbacks through mechanical stress that controls the flow of auxin through the tissue, that controls the rate at which the cells expand in the tissue, and controls, therefore, which cells attract auxin and which don't. And so the expansion of the cells can trigger any pathway that auxin triggers. The expansion makes the cells attract auxin from the base by a purely physical signaling, which then turns into a chemical signal, which then turns into a big flower. So what do we have? We've got a model now. It's computationally supported. It's experimentally supported. But just like our earlier model, this model opens a bunch of new questions for scientific analysis. What are the sensors in each cell that allow the cells to sense the cell wall stress, that allow the microtubules to sense stress? How do they sense directional stress? The empty molecules that are unoriented, because that would carry the orientation of the stress. How do the microtubules respond to stress? How does pin 1 redistribute in response to stress? Is this true only in the acute apical meristem, or does the whole plant work this way? And can we model this entire system in our computer and get fully realistic developmental outputs from the combination of chemicals and physical signaling that results from not only the gene activity patterns of the tissue, but from the physical state of the tissue, including its cytoskeleton and its cell walls? Just to give you an indication of a few of the directions we've taken these experiments, what we're seeing here is the microtubule pattern on the surface of a cotton leaf, embryo leaf. And you can see the microtubules realign in quite a lively fashion, just as they do in the acute apical meristem. These are the stomata, which have a particular stress pattern of expansion of a donut-shaped thing that causes the microtubules always to be aligned around the simple stress direction. If we look in detail at the microtubule pattern of the cells, we see that it changes quite a lot in some parts of the cells, but in other parts of the cells it's constant. And the parts of the cells where it's constant are those parts of the cell where the stress is highest, according to a physical model of the cell, and the stresses are created, in this case, by the shape of the cell, which is an oddly shaped cell, which has a series of lobes and necks, and where the necks are is where the stress is highest, and where the stress is most directional. It's anisotropic and directional. The microtubules are aligned and locked in those regions of the cell, and they vary in the other regions of the cell. So just like in the sheet of the stem, the cells of the leaf have a cytoplasmic skeleton that responds to stress, and we learned something new. The Severe stem cells are very small, and they have a single direction of microtubules. These are large cells with a complex internal stress pattern resulting partly from the tissue but partly from the shape of the cells, which isn't the case of the cuboidal cells in the sheet of the stem. And so we can see that the response to the microtubules is subcellular. We have high stresses in one part of the cell, the microtubules will align, and if we have isotropic stresses in another part of the cell, the microtubules keep changing in their modular fashion. And so it's an indicator of mechanism that tells us that in the case of the microtubules, it's something local within the cell system of stress and not the entire wall. While for pin 1, it seems to be something in the wall, and it does not have to be local. We can do the same sort of ablation experiments with these cells as we did before and see alignment of the cells around the expanding hole in our laser ablation as follows. And we can even take mutations that affect microtubule behavior to see exactly which aspects of the microtubules are necessary for alignment, such as in this case, where you can see that there's no particular alignment of the microtubules themselves. And the reason for that is that these cells are mutant in an enzyme that causes microtubules to be cleaved when they cross each other. So if you have crossing microtubules, one of them gets cut by this enzyme catenin, and this is a mutant in one of the two catenin genes from the Arabidopsis genome. So that it's that cleavage that causes the microtubules to align. How might that cause it to align to stress? There are many possibilities. The simplest might be that a stressed microtubule strains a little bit, and so it becomes less of a good substrate for the catenin. And so that the stress microtubules persist and the others get cut, which would eventually lead to a net alignment, cellulose biosynthesis, and the subsequent direction of expansion of the cell in a particular direction. So we're on the case. We're trying to understand the subcellular and molecular mechanisms for these stress sensations, stress sensing mechanisms that lead to pin 1 relocalization or cytoskeletal reorganization. And we can see that they're of critical importance in any complete model of how a plant grows and develops. We should also ask ourselves, what is a stress